Beamy Dana, 27 years old, work at a women's rights nonprofit. Been there almost 3 years. At this point, we do advocacy work, awareness campaigns, workplace discrimination support, that kind of thing. Also run workshops a couple times a month on topics like power dynamics, dismissive communication, that whole space. It's not glamorous work, but I genuinely believe in it. I believe in it so much, it basically becomes my whole personality, which matters for the rest of this story. I have a brother named Ethan. He's 2 years older than me, 29 when all of this is happening. Software engineer at some mid-sized tech company. Does fine. Lives in a decent apartment, about 20 minutes from our mom's place. We were never the type of siblings who talked every day or knew everything about each other's lives. But we stayed in contact, showed up to the same family dinners. Texted occasionally. Normal enough relationship. Then he starts dating someone. Her name is Claire. I meet her for the first time at a Sunday dinner at our mom's house. Ethan mentioned he'd been seeing someone for a few weeks and wanted to bring her around. I didn't have strong feelings about it either way. Going, and Claire shows up with Ethan. She's got dark hair, wearing something understated, very put together, but not in a look-at-me way. She says hello to everyone, shakes hands, hugs my mom. When my mom goes in for one, sits down at the table and mostly listens for the first part of the meal when she does speak. She's polite, brief, measured. My mom asks her where she grew up, and she answers. My mom asks how she and Ethan met, and she gives a short version with a little smile that's more or less the extent of her contribution to the conversation. That first night, Ethan talks more than usual, which is saying something because Ethan barely talks at all. Normally, the dinner is fine. The dinner is... Nobody has a bad time. Claire helps clear the table at the end, without being asked. I drive home, thinking she seems okay, quiet. But okay, don't think about her much over the next few weeks. Work is busy. We've got a fundraiser coming up, and I'm basically running the logistics side of it. Ethan and Claire keep doing whatever they're doing, and I stay in my lane. She comes to another family dinner, maybe a month later, same as before, listens, answers when asked, doesn't take up much space in the conversation. My mom clearly likes her, keeps asking her little questions, refilling her water. The whole thing, I'm paying more attention this time, though I notice that whenever I say something, especially if it's about work or anything adjacent to gender or social stuff, Claire sort of nods and doesn't engage, not rudely, not dismissively, just nods at one point. I say something about a case we were working on, a woman who'd been passed over for promotion multiple times in favor of less qualified men. Pretty straightforward stuff. Claire listens, nods, and when I finish, she says something like that, sounds like a frustrating situation for her, and then the conversation moves on. I file this away. Next dinner is a few weeks after that. My cousin and her husband are there too. So it's a slightly bigger group. Claire is still the quietest person at the table, by a noticeable margin. At some point, my cousin asks Claire what she does for work. Claire says she works in architecture. My cousin says, "Oh, interesting," and asks if she likes it. Claire says she does, that every project is different, and she finds it challenging in a good way. My cousin nods, and then someone else says something and the thread drops. I'm sitting there thinking, architecture. Okay, probably assistant work, or drafting, or something entry-level. She didn't give any detail. I don't ask more, because I'm already turning something else over in my head. The thing that's been building for a few dinners now. This feeling that Claire is someone who's made herself very small, who's learned to take up as little space as possible, to agree, to nod, to not push back in my work. We talk a lot about how women are conditioned to do exactly this, to perform agreeableness as a survival strategy in environments that punish them for being too much. I've seen it dozens of times. I think I'm seeing it now. I think Claire is sweet, but I also think she's disappeared inside this relationship. I say as much to Ethan one night when Claire is in the bathroom. I keep it low, not accusatory, just honest. I tell him she seems nice, but ask if she ever actually says what she thinks about anything. He looks at me for a second, without any particular expression, and says she says plenty. You just never ask her anything real. I don't have an immediate response to that. He doesn't say it with heat, just states it, and goes back to his drink. Claire comes back from the bathroom, and the moment is over, I drive home replaying it. Part of me thinks he's being defensive, the way men sometimes get when you try to examine the dynamics of their relationships. Another part of me wonders if he had a point. I land on the defensive explanation because it's more comfortable. The next couple of dinners, I try a different approach. I start asking Claire more directly about things. What does she think about X? How does she feel about Y? Her answers are consistent, thoughtful, but short, never very revealing. There's a dinner where I ask her something about career ambition, whether she ever thought about growing in her field, or whether she was content where she was. She says she's always thinking about what's next. I ask what that looks like for her specifically. She says it varies. That she's got some things in the pipeline, doesn't elaborate. I try to follow up, and my mom comes in with dessert. And the moment disappears. I spend the drive home analyzing the whole thing. She says the right things, but never shows the work. Never backs it up with specifics. I've seen this pattern before, too. Women who've been taught that their ambitions are less valid, who express them in vague terms because direct confidence gets punished. I genuinely believe I'm reading the situation correctly. I genuinely believe I'm the right person to see it. I cannot stress enough the problem. So I start doing the thing at dinners, not dramatically, not in a way that makes the whole evening about it, but consistently I work mentions of independence and self-worth into conversation. I bring up examples from my work. Women who came in unsure of themselves and grew into people who could actually advocate for what they wanted. I make comments here and there about the importance of having your own voice in a relationship. None of it is directed at Claire by name. It doesn't have to be. Everyone at the table knows who I'm talking about. Ethan says nothing for a while, just gets quieter each time. Claire keeps smiling, keeps being polite, keeps helping with the dishes. The dinner where I cross a line. I'm not even aware I'm crossing at the time. Ethan and Claire are talking about something, a weekend trip they'd taken. I think one of those comfortable back and forths between two people who know each other well, and I interrupt it. Not loudly, just matter-of-factly. I tell Ethan he deserves someone who pushes him, someone who has her own thing going on, her own fire. Something beyond just being easy to be around. I say it, like I'm pointing out something obvious that he's overlooked, like I'm doing him a favor by naming it. The table goes completely quiet. My mom picks up her glass and puts it down without drinking from it. Claire is looking at the table. Ethan puts his fork down, which is not something he does. He tells me he'd appreciate it if I kept my opinions about his relationship to myself. His voice is calm, but there is absolutely nothing casual about it. I start to say I'm coming from a place of genuinely caring about him. He says he knows, which is the only reason he's not making a bigger thing of it right now. And then he picks his fork back up and the dinner keeps going, but it doesn't really keep going. Not really. Everyone is just finishing their food. Now I help with the dishes after, say my goodbyes, hug my mom, say goodbye to Claire. She says, "Good night, Dana." Same smile, same exact smile. I drive home with this uneasy feeling I don't know what to do with. Tell myself it'll smooth over. Siblings have friction. It passes. Ethan texts me a few days later. Something normal. A news article or something. I reply. He replies, "Things seem okay on the surface." But at the next family thing, he's different with me. Not rude, just careful. Like he's editing himself before he speaks. Claire is the same as always. I cannot figure out if that's admirable or frustrating, and I go back and forth on it a few weeks after the dinner incident. Marcus throws a party. Marcus is Ethan's best friend. They've been close since they were kids. Same neighborhood, same schools, the whole history. He throws this gathering at his apartment. Not a huge thing. maybe 25 or 30 people. Ethan invites some family. Marcus invites his circle. I go. Because Ethan personally texts me the invite, which I take as a sign that whatever tension there was is fading. I get there, and it's the usual kind of apartment party music at a reasonable volume, people clustered in small groups. Kitchen is where everyone ends up. I know a few faces, make the rounds, get a drink. Claire and Ethan are already there when I arrive. They're talking to Marcus and some woman I don't recognize. I wave at Ethan from across the room. He waves back. Claire sees me and gives a small wave too. I go find someone else to talk to. End up in a long conversation with Marcus's girlfriend about her job, her commute, something about her upstairs neighbor. I'm half paying attention because I keep glancing across the room at Ethan and Claire. They just look like a unit, the way they stand near each other, the way Ethan angles toward her when someone else is talking. I don't know how to feel about it. I want him to be happy. Obviously, I just have this persistent nagging thing that says happy isn't the same as right about an hour into the party. Ethan moves toward the center of the room. Not dramatically. He doesn't clap his hands or whistle or anything, just kind of steps into a slightly clearer space and says, "Hey, can I get everyone's attention for a minute? The music gets turned down somewhere. People shift to face him." I'm near the edge of the group, drink in hand. He starts talking about Claire, something about how they met. I don't remember the exact version he told, because I've heard bits of it before then. He says something about how he spent the first few months waiting for something to go wrong, because things don't usually feel that easy for him. Says he kept waiting for the catch, and it never came. He's not doing a big speech thing. He's just talking like he's telling you something true. Then he reaches into the inside pocket of his jacket, and the second he does that, the whole room understands what's happening before the box even comes out. Someone near me makes a small sound. He opens it, gets down on one knee, says something to Claire directly, low enough that I only catch parts of it. From where I'm standing, I hear something about patience, something about lucky, something about he should have done this a lot sooner. Claire's hands go to her mouth. She's nodding before she says yes out loud. Then she says yes, and the room just goes. People are clapping. Someone shouts. Marcus is already across the room with his arms out. I join in. I'm not going to stand there not clapping. I'm not that far gone. I work my way over, hug Ethan, tell him congratulations. He hugs me back, says thanks. I turn to Claire, hug her. She hugs back. She's crying a little, genuinely. Not performing it. I tell her congratulations, and she says, "Thank you, Dana," and smiles at me. Same smile. The party shifts. People are talking louder now. Someone opens a nicer bottle of something. I drift back toward the edges I'm processing. I don't know exactly what I'm processing, but there's something happening in my chest that isn't quite happiness and isn't quite anything else I have a clean name for. Maybe 45 minutes later, I'm near the kitchen doorway. Not in the conversation happening nearby, just close to it. Marcus is talking to a friend of his, some guy I've never met. They're not talking to me. I'm just in the vicinity. Marcus says something about how Ethan had been planning this for months, but kept waiting for the right time. His friend asks what he was waiting for. Marcus says Claire had this massive project wrapping up, some commercial development downtown. Took over a year of coordination. His friend says that's a big deal. Marcus says, yeah, her firm handled the whole thing. Handled. She's got a small team, but they've been putting up serious numbers. He's really proud of her. His friend says she has her own firm. Marcus says, yeah, a few years now. She basically built it from scratch. I'm standing there. I don't move. Her own firm. Built it from scratch. A year-long commercial development project. A team I spent months sitting across from this woman at a dinner table, asking her if she'd ever thought about having ambition. She was running a company. She has been running a company this whole time. She told me she worked in architecture. I assumed she meant she filed things or made copies of blueprints or answered phones for someone who actually did the work, because she was quiet, because she didn't talk the way I expected a driven person to talk, because I had a picture of what ambition looks like, and she didn't fit it. So I concluded the ambition wasn't there. I drive home from that party, and the whole ride is very quiet inside my head. I don't call it what it is yet. I call it surprise. I call it new information. I spend maybe 3 or 4 days calling it that. Life continues in the meantime. I text Ethan, "Congratulations again," when I get home that night. Something warm and real, he replies. "Thanks," which is one word, but I tell myself he's probably exhausted and overwhelmed in a good way. I send Claire a message too. Tell her I'm really glad for them both. She replies with a short thank you and a smiley face. I don't read into the brevity back at work. The following week, we've got a panel event coming up. I'm coordinating 2 of the speakers and handling the venue communication. It keeps me busy enough that I'm not sitting with my thoughts too much. But they're there, underneath everything, her own firm. I'm running a session on the Tuesday of that week. It's one I've run several times before, about dismissive language in professional and personal contexts. How being told you're not ambitious enough, or that you should want more, or that you're not living up to your potential, is its own form of harm. How the intent of the person saying it doesn't change the impact on the person hearing it. How sometimes the people most convinced they're helping are the ones causing the most damage, specifically because they're so convinced I'm about 20 minutes into it. I'm talking about how this shows up in personal relationships, not just workplaces, how people apply it to partners, friends, family members, how it often comes wrapped in care, which makes it harder to name and harder to push back on. And somewhere in the middle of that section, I hear myself, not just the words, but the pattern underneath them. I think about the dinners. I think about every time Claire answered one of my questions, and I decided the answer wasn't enough every time she said she was happy, and I treated it like a symptom of something wrong, rather than a statement of fact, every time I worked something into the conversation that was really just me telling her she wasn't sufficient, and she kept coming back, kept showing up to the next dinner, kept being polite to me. I finish the session. I think I finish it okay. Nobody notices anything off. But I sit in my car for a few extra minutes before driving home a week or so after the party. I call my mom, ask about timelines, whether they've talked about dates, whether there's anything to help plan. My mom is vague in a specific way. She says they're still working things out, that it's their process. I push a little, and she says I should probably just talk to Ethan directly, the way she says it. Tells me she knows something. I text Ethan that same evening, ask if we can find a time to talk. He says sure, this week is packed, but soon that week goes by. I check in again. He says he'll call me when he gets a chance. He doesn't call. I'm starting to feel something I really don't like, feeling like I'm being handled at arm's length by my own brother. A few more days pass. I come home one evening and open the mailbox. There's a handwritten envelope with my name on it. I recognize Ethan's handwriting. I bring it inside, open it at the kitchen counter. It's a short letter, maybe 5 or 6 sentences, both their names at the bottom, Ethan and Claire. It says they've decided to keep the wedding very small, just immediate family and a few close friends. After careful consideration, they won't be including me on the guest list. They wish me well, that's everything. No phone call before. No conversation, no heads up. A piece of paper, I read it standing at my kitchen counter, first time through. I think I've misread something. Second time through, I think it's a tactic. They want me to reach out and address things. This is a kind of ultimatum. Third time through, I start to understand. It isn't either of those. Fourth time through, I just stand there with the paper in my hand. I don't call anyone that night. I sit on the couch for a while. I do this thing I've gotten good at, where I take something that's uncomfortable and I route it through a framework. I start thinking about the letter in terms of control and exclusion. Who benefits from removing me from this event? Whether Claire is making this call more than Ethan, whether this is about protecting a narrative rather than a relationship. I spend some time in that headspace because it positions me as something that was done too. Rather than something that did, it's easier in there. But it doesn't hold for very long because I keep landing back on the same place. Marcus saying her own firm built from scratch, and me, for an entire year, asking her if she'd ever thought about being more. I go to work the next day, don't tell anyone what happened, run my usual morning, and then I'm back in that same session room in the afternoon for a different workshop. This one's about patterns of behavior in close relationships. How we sometimes do to the people we love exactly the things we claim to be working against. I've run this one before too. It hits differently today. I keep thinking about Ethan's face at that dinner when I said he deserved someone with more to offer, the way he put his fork down, the way he said he knew it came from caring, like that was a limit on how much he was willing to excuse rather than a full explanation. A few days after the letter arrives, I call him. I go in, prepared to explain myself, to make the case that I was coming from a genuine place he picks up, which I half didn't expect. I start going through it. I say I got the letter. I say I'd like to understand what's happening. I say I think this might be a bigger reaction than the situation calls for. I say I was trying to look out for him, that everything I did at those dinners came from real love for him. He lets me finish without interrupting. Then he talks. He doesn't do it with any heat. He says something like, "You work in a field where you spend all your time talking about respect and dignity, and you spent the better part of a year sitting across from Claire and letting her know she wasn't enough." He says she never came to him after a dinner and complained, never asked him to say something to me or fix it or pick a side. She just kept showing up. He says he was watching the whole time and he made his own decision. Then he says he hopes I'm doing okay and that he means that, but that this is where things stand right now. Says he has to go. The call ends. I sit there with the phone. She never complained. That's the part I keep coming back to. Every single dinner, she went back home with Ethan, having just sat through another round of me, and she didn't weaponize it, didn't use it to build a case against me, didn't push Ethan to do something about his sister. She just came back the next time. I thought that was because she didn't have the tools to stand up for herself. Turns out it was because she didn't need to win. She already knew what she had. She had a company, a project, a whole career she'd built on her own, a person who loved her and saw her clearly. She didn't need my approval or my analysis or my concern, and she definitely didn't need me to tell her what fulfillment was supposed to look like. She was living it the whole time. She just wasn't performing it for me. The weeks after that are quiet. I go to work, I do my job, I come home, I don't reach out to Ethan again. Right away, my mom and I have a phone call at some point. She's gentle about it, doesn't assign blame directly, just says she hopes things find their way. Eventually, I can tell she's not surprised by how any of it played out. She's known us both, our whole lives. She probably saw this coming from a mile away, I think, about what it means that Claire built something real, and never once brought it up to prove a point to me. I think about all the times I said things like women who shrink themselves, women who lose their voice, women who've been conditioned to be agreeable, and how I applied all of it to someone who was none of those things. She wasn't quiet because she was defeated. She was quiet because she didn't need the room. There is a particular afternoon at work that sticks with me. I'm going through a filing cabinet, cleaning out some old materials from previous sessions. I find a packet from a workshop I designed about 2 years ago, before most of the Ethan and Claire stuff started. The topic is how well-meaning people cause harm. The whole framework is about intent versus impact. How being convinced you're helping doesn't mean you are. How the most difficult people to hold accountable are often the ones who are absolutely certain they're on the right side of things because they've pre-approved their own behavior as coming from a good place, so they never actually examine the behavior itself. I wrote this. I made the slides, wrote the handout, developed the discussion questions. I've run the session probably a dozen times. I sit in my chair in my office with this packet in my hands for a while. Then I put it back in the cabinet and go back to what I was doing. There's no dramatic moment of catharsis, no conversation where everything gets resolved. The wedding happens. I know it happens because my mom mentions it a few weeks after the fact. She says it was small, intimate. Everyone looked happy. She doesn't give me a lot of detail, and I don't push for it. I say that's good, and I mean it more than I expected to. I do want Ethan to be happy. I wanted that the entire time. My method of showing it was just completely wrong in almost every way. A while after the wedding, I start to notice I've changed how I run a few of my sessions. Nothing major, not a whole overhaul, but I've started being more careful about one specific thing. How I talk about women who don't present the way I expect them to present women who are quiet, who don't advocate loudly for themselves, who seem agreeable. I used to treat that as a flag, as something to address. I'm more careful now about the difference between a woman who's been silenced and a woman who just doesn't feel the need to be loud in the particular room she's currently in. They can look exactly the same from the outside. The difference is whether she's choosing it or whether it's been chosen for her. And you can't tell which it is by looking. You have to actually ask, and then you have to actually listen to the answer instead of deciding you already know what the answer means. Ethan texts me one day, not about anything serious, just a link to something, one of those dumb articles that's only funny if you grew up with the same references we did. I reply, he replies. We go back and forth a few times. It's not what it used to be, but it's not nothing either. Claire sends me a card around the holidays, actual card, handwritten. Short says she hopes I'm well and that she genuinely means it. Leaves it at that. No extended olive branch, no attempt to reopen anything, no pointed message underneath the pleasant one. Just a card. I believe her. When she says she means it, that's the thing that hasn't changed about Claire through all of this, even now, on the other side of everything. I believe her. She has no practical reason to be gracious toward me. I spent a year treating her like a project, and then didn't get invited to her wedding, and she sends me a card that's just genuinely nice, with no strings on it. I think that's probably the clearest demonstration of who she is and who I was that I'm ever going to get. I was so certain I understood her situation that I never actually understood her MFW. I designed a whole workshop about assuming you already know the answer, and then went home and assumed I already knew the answer. MFW. The woman I spent a year trying to help was the most grounded person at every single dinner. MFW. She sent me a holiday card. I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do with all of this. I'm still at the nonprofit, still run the sessions, still believe in the work. I just run the well-meaning harm one a little differently. Now, I ask the group a question I didn't used to ask. I asked them to think about the last time they helped someone who didn't ask for help, and whether they ever confirmed that the help was actually needed, or whether they just started helping because the need seemed obvious to them. The room always gets quiet for a second after that one. I know why. That's all I've got. Not a lesson, not a clean ending, just the part where you figure out that being right about the principle doesn't mean you were right about the person. And by the time you figure that out, the dinner table's already a year in the past. Actually, let me back up and fill in some things I skimped on, because there are a few dinners between the first one and the Marcus party that I think matter. There's one that happens around a holiday. Can't remember exactly which one. Doesn't matter, bigger group than usual. Ethan's there. Claire's there. My mom, my cousin, and her husband again. Some family friend of my mom's I've known since I was a kid. The table is full. There's too much food. Everyone is talking over everyone. A little at some point, the topic turns to stress and work-life balance. My mom's friend is retired and keeps saying she doesn't miss working at all. My cousin's husband says he's been killing himself at his job lately, and it's starting to wear on him. I talk about how our nonprofit has been short-staffed for months and how I've been picking up a lot of the slack. I say something about how burnout is an epidemic and that nobody talks enough about sustainable working conditions. The conversation kind of bounces around the table. At some point, someone asks Claire if her work gets stressful, and she says yes, definitely. There are periods where it's a lot, I ask, without really thinking about the tone I'm using. Whether she ever feels like she's just going through the motions, she looks at me for a second and says, no, not really. The parts that are hard are usually the parts she cares most about. I don't know what to do with that answer, so I nod and move on later. That same dinner, after my mom brings out dessert and everything gets more relaxed, Claire and my cousin end up in a conversation about something. I'm not even part of it. They're laughing about something. My cousin is leaning in, genuinely engaged. I realize I've never actually seen Claire laughing freely before, at least, not since I started watching her as a subject, rather than a person. It's different. She's different in that moment more, there I tell myself. It's because my cousin doesn't come with an agenda. I don't look at it any harder than that. There's another dinner, a couple of months before the Marcus party, just us and my mom, this time smaller, quieter. At some point during the meal, my mom mentions that she ran into someone from the neighborhood and that they'd just gone through a rough divorce. Conversation turns to relationships, how hard they are. The usual. My mom says something about how you can never really know someone until you've been through something hard together. Ethan says that's probably true. Claire says she thinks you can get a pretty good sense of someone from the small things, too. My mom asks what she means. Claire says something like how a person treats a waiter, how they behave when they're running late, whether they say thank you to people they don't have to say thank you to. She says she thinks those things tell you more than most people give them credit for. Ethan is nodding. My mom says she thinks that's exactly right. I'm sitting there thinking this is the most Claire has said in one stretch at a dinner in months. But I'm also thinking it's still not the kind of conversation that tells me anything about her inner life, or her ambitions, or whether she's living on her own terms. So I file it under pleasant but inconclusive looking back. What she said at that dinner was probably the most direct window into how she saw the world that she gave me. And I looked right through it because I was looking for something specific, and she wasn't giving me that specific thing. So I decided she wasn't giving me anything. There is something my colleague said to me once. Around the time all of this was going on, we were debriefing after a session, just the two of us in the room after everyone had left. I was venting a little about something. I don't even remember what. Something at work, unrelated to Ethan. And she said, almost offhand, that the hardest people to help are the ones who don't know they need help. And the second hardest are the ones who don't need it at all. I laughed at the time, said something about how you could always tell the difference. She gave me a look. I didn't fully understand then. I understand it. Now, the thing about being wrong in a confident and systematic way is that it doesn't feel like being wrong. It feels like being thorough. Every time I came to a dinner with a new angle, a new question, a new observation about Claire's behavior, I thought I was doing the work, gathering information, refining my read on the situation. I wasn't gathering information, I was building a case, and then gathering things that supported the case. Anything that didn't support it, I explained away. She's deflecting, she's performing happiness. She hasn't been asked the right question yet. There's always a next question when you've already decided what the answer has to be. And the thing that none of my frameworks accounted for was that Claire just didn't care what I thought. Not in a hostile way. She wasn't sitting across from me stewing. She genuinely wasn't troubled by my assessment of her, because she wasn't looking to me for validation. She had her company, her work, Ethan, her own clear sense of what her life was. She came to those dinners because she was part of the family now, not because she needed anything from the room. I was the one who needed something from the room. I needed to be the person who understood things, who could see beneath the surface, who could identify what was wrong and point toward what was right. That's the job I'd given myself, and she wasn't playing the role I needed her to play for the job to make sense. So instead of questioning the job, I questioned her. I'm aware this sounds obvious, written out like this. It wasn't obvious. In the middle of it, I had a very tidy explanation for everything, okay? So I said the letter hit me hard. But there's one more thing that happened between the letter and the phone call with Ethan that I should mention. I went out for a walk the evening after I got it. Nothing intentional, just needed air. I ended up walking through a neighborhood I don't usually go through. There was a building going up on one of the blocks, mid-construction. Scaffolding all around it, I stopped and looked at it for a second. There was a sign on the hoarding around the site, one of those development signs with the architectural rendering and the company name. I don't remember the exact name on the sign, but I stood there and I thought about Claire, about what it takes to build something from nothing, to have a vision for something that doesn't exist yet, and to push it through every stage until it's real, to manage a team, to deal with clients, to navigate whatever the construction and development world throws at you, and to do all of that quietly, without making it the first thing out of your mouth at every dinner. I stood there for a few minutes, then I walked home, called Ethan. The next day, you already know how that went. There's one more thing I want to add, because I think it's the most honest part of this whole story. At some point, after everything settled, I started thinking about the men in Claire's professional world, because architecture, especially at the level she was operating at, is still a field where women have to work harder to be taken seriously, where walking into a room as the person running the project means having to establish that credibility every single time. And I thought about what it probably cost her to operate in that world every day, to fight the battles worth fighting and let go of the ones that weren't, to know when to push and when to let something slide off. And I thought about how she sat at our family dinners and let my comments slide off, not because she couldn't handle me, but because I wasn't worth engaging with on that particular battlefield. She had the bigger rooms to hold her ground in. I was just the sister-in-law who thought she had it figured out, the least threatening person in her week. Probably, and somehow that realization is both humbling and, I don't know, kind of clarifying. She wasn't passive, she was strategic. She knew exactly which fights mattered, and she didn't waste energy on the ones that didn't. I called every single one of my fights important, because if I was fighting, it had to matter. That's the trap I was in, and she never pointed it out to me directly. She just kept not being what I needed her to be, until eventually that was enough of an answer on its own. I'm going to stop here. If you read this whole thing, I don't know what you expected at the end. There's no moment where I confront Claire, and she breaks down and says, "You were right. I was lost. Thank you for seeing me." There's no version where Ethan calls me and says, "I've thought about it, and you had a point." It just sort of ended quietly, the way things end when nobody is performing anything. Make of that what you will.